でまだもしもしお世話になります。まだ終わってないです。はい、すいません、申し訳ございません。あ、お疲れ様です。はい。This drinking party is so fun. I have just been to so many of these this week. Senpai, you want me to drink another beer? Okay, okay. 美味しいですね. God, this is never ending. How many of these freaking drinking parties do I have to go to? And it's already 11 p.m. Alright, I'm just kidding guys, that was not what it's actually like to work in Japan. That was very stereotypical. So today I'm going to answer all the questions you guys sent in and show you what the reality, in my experience, is working here. So let's get to it. Do you feel like you're forced to work overtime? I would say yes and no. No, because I mean I could just quit and leave, right? But yes in the sense that it's actually written into a lot of contracts here in Japan. Overtime is like part of working here. Like it's very, very rare to find a contract where it's not just part of it. And I think it's something like 20 or 30 hours overtime per month that is included in your annual salary and monthly salary. Overtime work that I'm doing isn't just like, oh, my boss hasn't left so I can't leave. It's more like, oh, I gotta keep doing this. Did you experience any culture shock? I didn't experience too much culture shock before coming to Japan because I'd been here on several trips, I'd studied abroad, I had lots of friends, I consumed lots of media, but there were a few things once I got my first proper full-time job, like not like a part-time one, a full-time one, where I was like, huh, that's not what I expected. One thing was like being 30 seconds late to the office day, so we had to be there at 10, I was there at 10 a.m, 30 seconds, and I got in trouble. Another thing would be like one time I was told that it's more professional if you wear makeup when coming into work, but it wasn't really enforced or anything, it was just like kind of a comment, which I don't know if someone would say that to me, and I don't know what the kind of standards are overseas. I do know that in certain industries, like to look more together, like put together, is important. That being said, like those are kind of the main things that kind of stick to my memory in all my years so far, so not too much. Are work schedules in Japan insane? I would say on average, in my experience, I have had some really, really insane times where I'm working like late until midnight, back to back, but that's not all the time. For me personally, like that is less common now, but when I was working a few years back, that was quite common. Like I was very tired, like I was constantly working, I couldn't go out in the evenings to see friends, and sometimes I'd have to work on the weekends because like sometimes the business trip would just fall under those days. That said, that is not standard across the board. I have Japanese friends as well as foreign friends who have really good working conditions and they will finish on the dot, no overtime, but I would say that's not super common for everyone. I think there's a lot of people who do at least a little bit of overtime, if not a lot. And at my company, there are people who worked way harder than I did. They still work really hard. I do think if you're at a startup or a small company, you're probably gonna have like hard working conditions no matter where you are in the world, because that's just the culture at those kinds of companies. So it's really case by case, what kind of manager, what kind of position. I can't really generalize for that one. I definitely don't have any friends who have the craziest work schedule where they're missing the last train or they're like up till like 4 a.m. or anything, luckily, touch wood. But there's definitely like some people in my life who work for very traditional Japanese companies where they're like out till 11, or I have Japanese friends as well who come back like at the last train. So it's a good thing that the last train exists, because I think if it didn't, people would definitely be sleeping in the offices, and maybe they are, but I think that last train does like help encourage the company to be like, yeah, you at least need to leave and go home and come back in like 7 hours. But yeah, I haven't had that very extreme experience. What do I love and what do I hate about my job? To be honest, the thing that I love the most is also what I don't hate, but I find one of the most challenging things, and it is travel. I absolutely love traveling, especially in Japan, because there are so many amazing hidden gems and scenery and seasons. Like it's unreal. Like honestly, it was my dream job to be able to travel for work. I didn't expect to be able to do it this frequently and in this capacity, but yes, I love that so much, and I feel so lucky every time I get to be sent somewhere to like promote it. But at the same time, like I've been in this industry for 4 years and I have traveled a lot. Like I travel to several prefectures in every month. It does kind of wear you down, and I've definitely reached a bit of a burnout of travel because it just was relentless. Like you come back from a trip and then you're on the next one, and maybe you won't even come back, you just go from one to the other. And of course my hobby is actually traveling, so in between like trips I would continue traveling because I was like, well, I want to see stuff while I'm already out in this like remote area because like, when am I gonna come here next? So I like to take advantage of those moments, but I think like I did it too much and I reached a point where I'm like, I need to just like chill out and stay in Tokyo. I know I'm incredibly fortunate in this position and I know how lucky I am, so I don't think it's a negative thing that I get to travel so much, but it's definitely something I need to like take care of my mental and physical health and make sure I don't overdo it. The kind of things you're eating on business trips and work trips is not nutritional. Like, you don't get time to exercise, you don't have enough proper sleep, and you're just like constantly working. So that is definitely one of the difficult things. And my diffuser just turned off. I really love this. I highly recommend getting one of them. Does working in Japan automatically let you stay here long term? No. When you work in Japan, you are most likely going to be on a visa. The majority of like non-Japanese people are, that I know. And there's different types of visas. So there's the work visas, student visas, entertainment visas, spouse visa. And I'm just on a regular work visa and I have to renew it every time it expires. And depending on like what your work conditions are and your qualifications, you might have 6 month, 1 month, 3 year, 5 year visas. Renewal time is very stressful because you don't know if immigration's gonna approve you. Like, you most likely are going to be fine if you've already got it once, but there's always that risk, and I feel like that's one of the really stressful things about like working in a foreign country, because you don't know if you're going to have to just pack up and leave depending on how immigration sees you. But the majority of times it's fine. One thing I want to mention is, compared to Australia where you're tied to your company when you work, the visa is basically sponsored by a company. Japan is not like that. Essentially, you just need one company to give you the okay, and when you apply for the visa, if you get the visa, you can leave the company anytime. Like, you can still maintain your visa even if you're not with that company. Whereas Australia, you just lose your visa instantly. But you do need to find another job. You can't just be on a work visa and be unemployed. But there are visas where you're job hunting and all that, but you have to have started on the work visa to get there. You travel a lot for work. How long have you been away before? The longest I've been away is about 9 days. And for me, that was a lot too. I was like, wow, that's a long trip. Most trips are mainly between like 2 to 3 days, I'd say on average. Some trips are like day trips where we're going all the way out and then coming all the way back, or like staying overnight and coming back the next day, but constantly like on the go, to be honest. Very used to traveling constantly. How often do I need to go in the office and check in with them? Originally, the office days were once a week, and then it increased to twice a week, but then it went down to once a week, and now I have complete flexibility in not going in, and only if I want to, or maybe if there's a big like meeting, which happens like very rarely, I'll have to go in. Before, yeah, it was like, if I didn't have a business trip, I'd be going into the office on the set days. But nowadays, like, it's very chill. We have meetings before a big trip, or any trip. No, not necessarily, but most trips will have like some sort of online meeting. But if we can't all organize our schedules, or it's not required, we'll probably brief each other on the train or like at the hotel before like heading out. But I would say that's like less common. We definitely have like several meetings in the lead up to our like work trips. But obviously it depends on the complexity of the project and the client needs, and meetings are quite common. Can you submit your portfolio or resume to a random store or company in Japan? I totally think you should do it. Is it common? I wouldn't say so, but I've seen friends do it. I actually had an Australian friend who was looking for it was a part-time job here in Tokyo, and he just went to like secondhand clothing stores and cafes and handed in resumes, and he got a bunch of interviews. So totally do that. I think there's nothing wrong with it, rather than going online and looking for applications, because you're going to stand out by doing that, and people are going to know that you're passionate and taking the initiative to try and go get the job. I actually got my first internship with a Japanese company in Sydney by doing that. They didn't even have like a job application posting or anything. I just went on their website and I was like, hey, I think you should hire me for a job because I'm great. Actually, someone at Tokyo Creative got their position by doing so. So you never know until you take a chance, and you know what? Even if it doesn't go well, try again, because eventually you're gonna get there. So I believe in you. What was your favorite work trip so far? One of my favorite work experiences was definitely a trip to Kochi, because I didn't have any expectations going into this trip. We were like going to this rural area, we're just doing kayaking for a client video, and I fell in love with the area. And I think because we also had like a really relaxed client and the trip wasn't too stressful, like we had time to like enjoy ourselves, I had a blast. I was like, this is insane. This place is beautiful. I think it's my favorite work trip to date, but I also had a really good time when I went to Okinawa, because once again, it was just like a relaxed work trip. I think they're my favorite, because the trips where you're like constantly like, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, they're watching me, they're like stressful, to be honest. So yeah, chill trips where with beautiful scenery, I guess like water related, because Okinawa was like remote island with beaches. Kochi was like mountain riversides. Yeah, they're my favorite for sure. How do I get a job in something other than English teaching? My advice if you want to work in Japan full-time in something other than English teaching is figure out what your skills are. Get some qualifications for something that you are skilled in. So for example, like if you have, I don't know, the ability to do accounting, or if you're like a medical student or something like that, like just have a skill that you can bring to a job. So I knew that I wanted to do something in business. So at university, I did a major in international business. I didn't know what kind of job I wanted. I just knew I needed to have some sort of hard skills that I could provide to an employer. But of course, if you don't have any skills, I would then focus on developing Japanese skills, because most jobs in Japan will require Japanese unless you are really special and you have skills in, I don't know, IT, engineering, where they don't really require employees to have good Japanese. Anything with client-facing roles, you're gonna have Japanese. That's just like the reality. Unless you're in like a very foreigner-friendly company, or like you're facing like foreign clients. That's the exception to the rule. So yeah. How far do I have to commute to the office? When I go to the office, it's basically an hour, and I hate commuting for one reason, because the trains are so packed. And it's not just one train, you're taking like several trains, sometimes 3 trains, 4 trains, like it's just a nightmare. So the thing is, you could be like, well, why don't you live near your office? But like, since I've joined Tokyo Creative, their office has changed like 4 times. I wouldn't want to pick my neighborhood based off the company's office, because you don't know when that's going to change, especially now that like remote work is such a big thing. Although for some people, they want to live, they know they're going to be at this company forever, and maybe the company's like, yes, we're going to have this office forever. That's a situation you can consider, but for me, I was like, no, I like where I'm living. I'm not moving just because I got a job, unless the job was like really far away, like 2 hours commute. I don't think I could do that. Company in Japan will always pay for your commute. It's part of like the deal here. Even if you have a part-time job, it's one good thing about working in Japan. Commuting expenses covered by the company. What keeps me going every day and what's my creative passion? That is a really good and difficult question to answer. I don't have like 5-year, 10-year goals, to be honest. I have like more short-term goals, probably like 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And every day I just want to improve myself, and I like to work hard. I think I'm a pretty hard worker, and right now like one of my creative outlets is making content on the internet, and I've been enjoying it so much, and I kind of want to keep progressing in that direction. So my outlet is just making videos and being myself and connecting with you guys, because it's really cool whenever I get a message from someone who's like related to what I've done or found something helpful. It really just motivates me to keep going. What is career growth like in Japan? I think career growth depends on the company you're working at. For me, like there was obviously a few options I had where I could keep working to become a manager or something, or I could take another path. And I was recently offered the opportunity to go towards the more content creation route and then have Tokyo Creative back me up. So I've actually selected that route, and I'm gonna try my best to, you know, succeed. But if I don't succeed, I have no idea where I want to go with my career. I'm just kind of winging life. Like, I don't know where I'm gonna end up. I guess like I'm not trying to climb that corporate ladder, but if things don't work out, I think like we'll just see. I can't give you an answer on that, and I might be different to the next person, but I found like a lot of the foreigners that live in Japan don't have that like corporate ladder mindset. They're just trying to enjoy their everyday lives and get by. Maybe I'm not surrounding myself with very like career-oriented people, but yeah, that's what I've seen. What happens if you get sick in Japan, and do you get in trouble for it? The unfortunate reality is that in Japan, you only get about 10 days, well, starts with 10 days, paid leave per year. And every year that you work at a company, it kind of increases steadily. Like you get an extra 1 or 2 days. But that does not include sick leave, which is so brutal. It's so rough. So in the past, when I got sick, I probably took like a paid leave holiday, or like I took replacement days, which are days that you can take off if you've worked over the weekend. And because I had to travel so much and do so much work, I had a lot of those. In really bad scenarios, I think what happens is if you're really sick and you can't work for a period of time, you can basically ask them to stop paying your salary, I think. I could be wrong, like don't quote me on this, but I feel like I've heard that before. And so you might get paid for less days of work, or, you know, if you just have like a cold or something, you're probably gonna have to just keep working through it. A lot of people do that, or they'll take like half a day leave. But you can kind of negotiate things, like if you have a good relationship with your like company, maybe they'll be like, oh, it's fine, like we know you're sick, so like just go. One good thing about working at Tokyo Creative was that if I had to go to the dentist or like I had to go to the doctor, the physio, they would be pretty generous and flexible about letting me go on a weekday during the middle of the day, so long as there was like no meetings or anything planned. That was not just for me, that was for my other colleagues as well. And I think that was so great because there's a lot of things in Japan that you can't do on the weekends, including going to the bank and all those kinds of things. And they were really flexible with that. So I'm really grateful. I would have hated having to take like a paid leave, one of my 10 days paid leave to like go to the bank or like go to the doctor. So I don't know if that's common, but definitely at like our company where they were a bit flexible with things, that was really awesome. Does the convenience of having affordable food options everywhere outweigh any benefits to bringing your own home-cooked lunch? Having so many convenient options to have lunch around the office and when you're traveling is definitely something everyone takes advantage of. I'd say like 80% of my like colleagues would go out for lunch. Like only 20% would have a bento. There were a couple of people who had like wives who were making them bento, very like stereotypical, yes. Yeah, people would just go out, buy a bento, they'd go to like a family restaurant, like a cheap budget place, or have konbini food. Yeah, that was what most people did and do. What's the situation with healthcare in Japan when you have a full-time job? So everyone working in Japan has to be part of the national health insurance like system here in Japan. And even if you're unemployed, you have to be part of it. Every month you'll get a slip and you have to keep paying it. But if you're a company employee, it's like automatically deducted from your monthly salary. And I think it's like $200 a month or something. Because it's automatically deducted, I don't really see it. But it's pretty good. Like once you have the health insurance, you only have to pay 30% of your actual bill. So let's say the bill is like $100, you're only paying $30 because the government will subsidize like 70% of that. And so that's like through your payments, you get to have that. And it's not optional, you have to be part of it. Otherwise you're gonna get like in trouble when it comes to immigration, like time to renew your visa, or if you ever want to do anything in Japan. So if you want to stay here long term, definitely pay for it. Also, one thing I want to mention is it includes dental healthcare, which is insane. It's so cheap here. Whenever I get my teeth cleaned, I'm paying like 3,000 yen, which maybe in USD is $20. They're actually American dentists. Like there's a place I go to that has all these like English speaking foreign trained people, and it's like 3,000 yen. It's so good. I love it. What are contracts like in Japan? There are different types of contracts here. The most common one is like seishain, so that's kind of like your full-time employee rather than a contractual one. I recommend getting that because if you're a seishain, that means like it's really easy to get a visa because they're like, oh, you're full, like you're actually employed and you're not just like a part-time like contract. But there are people who are just like on 1-year contracts. I think like what's most common here is just like a not lifelong, but you just have like no end date to your contract. And then in terms of like the terms, like it'll say like how many hours you have to work, what your pay is, how do we get paid in Japan. Most companies are going to just transfer you via bank, like transfer. I am paid in yen because my company is Japanese. I would imagine most people working in Japan are paid in yen, but if you're getting paid in USD, lucky you, because that would be a really amazing like rate, at least right now. What kind of benefits do I have? No like benefits like, oh, you get to have this yoga class or you get free lunch at the cafeteria. I think my company doesn't have that because we're really small, but if you worked at somewhere like, I don't know, Google Japan, I'm sure there's really cool benefits. I guess my biggest benefit would be I get to travel across the entire country for work and I get to meet really cool, talented people. It's part of the job, but it's not like in the contract. It's just like, I see it as a benefit. How many holidays do I get a year? On average, you're gonna start with like 10 days. And I don't know if this changes, like if you're like 30 years old and you get a new job, if it's just like, okay, well you're 30, so you should have like 15 days. Or because you're like a fresh graduate, you're gonna have just 10 days. Most people will start on 10 days and then it will just like slowly add up. So I think like I'm up to like 14 or 15 days or something. What will my next job be? Do I have any career goals? Right now, my goal is actually to keep going with content and try and make that full time. I know that's very different to maybe what you wanted to hear, like I want to be like a career woman, but I'm actually seeing like a lot of benefits to working in content in Japan, and I'm enjoying it so much that that's where my future hopefully takes me. It's obviously very hard to like make it or break it here, so we'll see how I go, but I have a lot of support and I have obviously seen some of the best people working in Japan in this industry, so I have a lot of insider knowledge, and I feel like if I can keep doing my best, I might make it, but you never know. So I'm just taking it as it comes, and I have no idea. I didn't have these plans when I left uni. I didn't have these plans 2 years ago. I've just found myself here. So I'll check back in with you in 1 year to see how I go. What's your favorite Japanese business custom? Omiyage. Omiyage means souvenir, and basically whenever you travel in Japan, you've got to bring back some snacks for your colleagues. And I have benefited from this so much because whenever my colleagues go from like the northern part of Japan to like the southern part, or even just the neighboring prefecture, they're bringing back like the coolest snacks, and they're from all these local places. And that's why today I want to introduce Sakurako! Sakurako is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box that supports local snack makers and produces authentic Japanese treats inside. And each month there's 20 in here, but you also get a Japanese tea as well as a special Japanese tableware included. Every month there's actually a different theme, and this time the theme is a night of sakura. And in Japan it's really popular to go to light-ups in the evening, and they're called yozakura. And the box is designed just like that. Inside there's always a monthly booklet which tells you all about Japanese cultural information as well as allergen info. There's so much in here this month, and I've heard that there are many sakura themed snacks again. This month's tableware item is the cutest little sakura themed cup. Look at that! I'm a big fan of cashew nuts, and I can't believe there are sakura themed ones, so let me give this a go. It smells so sweet. Oh my goodness. That is a really subtle sakura flavor. I really like that. The mochi this month is huge. Look at it. They're all mochi. I love this. Oh my god. It tastes like sakura. I love that they include 2 tea bags so you can share it with a friend. And this month it is a blueberry hibiscus tea. And I decided to have it iced. Come by. If you want to experience Japan from the comfort of your own home, check my link down below and use the code seerasan for $5 off your first purchase. And I highly recommend, if you guys are ever going to get a Sakurako box, to do the sakura ones so we can enjoy the sakura season from wherever we are in the world. Alright, back to the Q&A. What's the work culture like at startups in Japan? Is it different from big corporate companies? Of course it's different. Startups everywhere in the world I think are pretty similar. Like, you gotta work hard, you have a small team, you gotta be flexible, you gotta be able to do lots of different skills. You are not just a product analyst or whatever. You have to do like finances, you have to do work on the website, you have to do all sorts of things. The good thing about startups is you develop a range of skills in areas that you wouldn't normally get the opportunity to like try out, and you can figure out what you really like. And I think that's something that most people should try and experience. I haven't worked at a big company here, so I can't really comment on that, but I do hear that big companies don't necessarily mean that you have to work less. Like, both have difficult work environments, so it really just depends on where you work at the end of the day. That is the main thing. Do I plan to stay and work in Japan long term? I definitely want to stay here for at least a few more years, but I don't see myself like retiring here. That is one thing I'm like, I don't know if that's for me. And I'm not gonna say no to it, but I definitely can't be like, yes, that's my life goal. What was my experience getting my visa here for the first time? So I came on this trip to Japan. When I say this trip, it was in 2019 when I first moved, and I came on a working holiday visa, which is an agreement that Japan has with several countries around the world, and it allowed me to work in Japan for a year and a half, and I could get full-time jobs or part-time jobs. It was very flexible. I just couldn't work in like the night industry. From there, I found my job at Tokyo Creative, and they were like, hey, we really like working with you, so let's extend your visa. So while I was working at TC, I had the working holiday, and then I swapped it over to like a normal work visa, and the rest is history. I'm still on that now. Do you think it's expensive to work in Japan? I personally think that living in Japan is affordable, but I wouldn't say it's cheap. Now, you might be thinking, what is she talking about? It's so cheap to do this and this and this, but that's because you're earning money and exchanging it at a really good rate and coming here. The salaries in Japan are terrible. This is not a secret. It's the truth. They're awful. And I'm just saying this in comparison to if I worked overseas, I'd be earning a lot more. But in Japan, this goes for everyone. Engineers, teachers. For instance, like the average graduate salary here is 3 million yen, which is like, what, I don't know, 20 grand USD, 30 grand Australian. I'd say the average salary for someone in their mid to late 20s in Tokyo is probably 4 million yen, which is not terrible, but it's definitely not great. And I'm talking about people who are like really qualified. I definitely wouldn't say having a 4 million yen salary is like you're poor or anything, but I'm like a single person, right? I don't have children, I don't have a partner I have to pay for, but you can just get by. Like, you can get by, you can have like, you can go out for dinner with friends every now and then, you can go travel like every now and then, but it's nothing like you can relax and be like, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable. Like, I think even if I wanted to get a pet or something, I'd be like, okay, that's a big expense. I need to really consider it. Nowadays, with inflation, because Japan, all the prices were just not changing for the longest time. It has jumped up so much in the past year of living here that some things are just so expensive now that it makes you reconsider, especially vegetables. If you want to cook at home, you are spending a lot to eat a nutritional meal. For even someone in like engineering, like computer science, you'd probably be earning like maybe 60 to 80 grand, like, 6 million to 8 million yen, which is like, I don't know, like 40, 50 grand. It's quite different and it's quite shocking, but I have a lot of friends who make the sacrifice to live in Japan, even though it's a huge pay cut, because they like living here that much. And I think I'm the same, where I'm like, I'm not working here for the money, I'm working here for the life experience and just because I enjoy it. So one of my recommendations is, if you're coming here, don't expect to earn a lot, just expect to have a good time. How do you find good, stable work? Are there any websites to do this? Yes, there are tons of websites you can check out. There's places like JLPT, you can use LinkedIn. There are so many work forums that you can come to where they're looking for foreigners in particular, or just like go to the normal Japanese ones. The most important thing to do is make sure you have your resume ready. You have all the Japanese requirements, like let's say you need a JLPT certificate, or you need potentially to have a COE, so you're already living in Japan. Or another big thing is, if you're job hunting here, make sure to have like the full attire. For me, it wasn't too important. I just had to have like a business casual look when I went for my like online meeting or interview. Here, there are certain companies, especially like the official shukatsu period in Japan, where you have to have like the right blazer, the right top, shoes, everything. But there are stores where you can buy that. But yeah, just figure out what kind of industry you're going for, because if it's like the creative industry, you can just turn up, maybe not like this, but you know, business casual. Do you feel like Japan has a competitive salary versus Australia and the rest of the world? No, they do not have competitive salaries here, as I covered in an earlier question. No. One reason for this is because a lot of people around the world just are desperate to live in Japan and will sacrifice a higher salary. So that's kind of my impression. And local Japanese people aren't really fighting to increase their salaries. Like, they're just gonna put up with it. So I think that's like two potential reasons that contribute to such low pay. What are some of the best jobs for foreigners to get into? Some of the best jobs for foreigners is somewhere where you are the minority. I think that's where you can have the better odds of getting a job, as well as better pay. But that's the same across everything, right? So in that sense, something that would have high pay is like a job where you have a lot of skill required, because not anyone can do it. So you have a competitive edge over someone. You're able to bargain more when it comes to wages. Can I get a job at Tokyo Creative? Yes, you can, if you have Japanese skills as well as another skill set. Because we get a lot of people asking, can I work at Tokyo Creative, but they don't have any Japanese or they're not based here. So you've also got to be based here. You can't just be from overseas in almost 99% of cases. But that being said, if you are really highly talented at videography or editing, you might have a shot. It's not up to me. So if you're interested, head to the Tokyo Creative website and apply via the email there. Even if we're not looking for people, it's always a good shout to just give it a go and submit something. I want to work in marketing in Japan, but I want to only work 9 to 5 and not do crazy work hours. Is this possible? If you want to work in Japan, you cannot guarantee that you won't have crazy work hours. It really just depends on the company you enter, because things can change. Like, one of your managers changes and then all of a sudden you've got more work hours, or it could be the opposite. I've seen it go both ways. You start off really easy and then it slowly gets worse, or like sometimes like there's a crunch time of year. So if you're in accounting, it would probably be like at the end of the financial year. Or if you're in tourism, it would be like autumn leaf season, because that's always crazy. But just go in with an open mind, and of course don't be totally abused and like work to death, but expect like a little bit. Unfortunately, that's the reality of most people I see working in Japan. Is there a learning curve if you want to work in Japan for foreigners? I think there are certain things along the way that you should try and pick up, like business mannerisms and cultural etiquette. But of course, I don't think that you should, you know, work yourself to death and like stay into the office till the last one. If that's like something that you're not feeling comfortable doing, then I think you need to look for a better job or find a way out, because that's not going to help you long term. Things that you can try and like work through are like things that I've tried to do, like get used to writing Japanese business emails. I still am terrible at it because I don't actually get a lot of opportunities to do it. And I'd always be like, this doesn't sound good. But you know, there were a few opportunities where I got to try it. I'm not a beginner, but I'm definitely like, I feel like I'm a beginner in business or writing. I can have a conversation. I can be all keigo, like, watakushi wa Sarah desu. Oh, no, already wrong. Watakushi wa Sarah to moshimasu. Osewa ni narimasu. Tokyo Creative no Sarah to moshimasu. What level of JLPT do you need to get to Japan and get a job? The bare minimum for Japanese level is basically an N2, in my opinion, across the board. So if you have N2, you probably can get yourself like quite a few jobs. And honestly on LinkedIn, when you apply, a lot of them require minimum N1, and this was for business and like marketing, because you have to like talk to clients and it's a lot of like emailing. So it depends on the industry. Like I have friends who have like barely N4, but they've got like jobs in Japan. So it really just depends. And honestly, like at the end of the day, I personally don't see the value in JLPT for being like a barrier to getting a job, because just because I have N1 or N2 doesn't mean I can actually speak Japanese, read it well, and be fluent or communicate effectively. So I mean, like, if you don't have it, don't let it stop you from applying for jobs unless it physically, like, the online system won't let you, because you never know. You never know. They might be like, oh, yeah, actually, you're pretty good. I see potential in you. So don't let it hold you back, but also keep working on it, because at the end of the day, it's like a degree. Japan really cares about qualifications, like have you graduated university and JLPT, and plus it helps you have a better shot at getting a good visa from immigration. Have I ever regretted working in Japan? No. Luckily, I have had a really great company who has supported me as a non-Japanese person and given me the opportunity to live a great life here. But that being said, there are moments where I'm like, damn, this is hard, and I have cried a lot. Like there have been nights where I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Is this what I need to be doing? And I think that's normal, especially if you're living abroad. And especially like when it comes to like cultural misunderstandings and like obviously the pressure you have as like a non-Japanese person. Like I feel like you're held, not that you're held to a different standard, but like everything requires like a lot more thought than, you know, like a local person. Of course it's hard for them, but in a different way. So there have been moments where I'm like, damn, this is really hard, but I'm glad I could stick through it and like keep working. But it's definitely changed me as a person. I'm not the same person I was like 4 years ago. I'm a lot more aware of certain things, and a lot more, I can get more stressed about certain situations because I'm aware of how Japanese people think. They're like, if this isn't like this, then they're gonna freak out, or this is gonna be like this. And I'm like, there's like 1,000 things going through my head. And so like a small example of that is like whenever we check out of a hotel, when I'm with the Japanese staff, they're like making the bed, cleaning the room so it's spotless, right? And it's like, I don't think I would ever want to disrespect like a hotel and like not clean it, in the sense that like it's completely like a filthy place, but they're like making the bed and like cleaning the cups and everything. And I feel like at least in the West, when you check out of a hotel, you don't have to do all those things. But that's one thing that I've like taken away with me, and it's a good thing. But like when I stayed in Australia and we went to a hotel, like my friends don't like make the bed, or like my foreign friends in Japan, and it kind of like, I can't undo that, what I see now. Or like, for example, when we're at a restaurant and we're filming, they're like cleaning up everything so much, and then when we finish the dishes, they're like, we can wash it for you. And it's like the next level of courtesy and everything. And I feel like that's stuck with me, if it's good or bad, because like people overseas or like people around me are like way more chill, but I'm like, oh, I gotta do this. And I'm not even on the same level of my Japanese colleagues. They're like extreme. And it's a good thing, but it's also like you're constantly like stressing about little things that you wouldn't normally be stressed about. Have I had many jobs since moving to Japan? Yes, I have, but none of them were like full-time gigs except for the one I have now, and I've just stayed at the same company. Before, I had lots of part-time jobs. Like I worked in several cafes, I worked in like restaurants, and I also worked as like an English, it was like a tutor, but it was kind of part-time, and as well as like on university campus, so it was very casual. Those are the only other jobs I've had here to my knowledge and memory. But working part-time in Japan is a complete different story to working full-time, and everything's a lot more chill. But I think it's a great way to like kind of put your foot in the industry, like working in Japan and getting a taste for what it's like, because honestly, part-time jobs here are way more intense than back like home in Australia for me. Like they were really rough. Like I had some bad experiences. Maybe that's for another time, but yeah, that was a lot. Are foreigners seen as lazy or undevoted to work? Honestly, I do feel like there is a division of foreigners versus Japanese, and I've just experienced that not only in like my work life, but like my personal life and just in general life here. And I think it's just really hard for such a homogenous country to really treat everyone like the same. And I don't feel like it's intentional, but it just happens naturally. And I do feel like I've faced like adversity, and it's been really hard sometimes to feel like you're being treated differently. But I think you have to not take it too seriously and be like, unless it's like a really extreme situation, just be like, okay, then it's not meant. Or if you do feel like something has been unfair, there's been unfair treatment, try and raise your voice and be like, hey, this is this is how I feel, and maybe the people who are doing it don't even realize. I think that's the thing in Japan, like there's a lot of casual racism, but they don't understand. And so throughout my years here, I've experienced like different levels of racism, and of course as a white person I don't have it nearly as bad as other people, so I'm very aware of that. But there are definitely times where I'm like, wow, not necessarily at work, just in general, where I'm like, wow, that sucked. Like, but I don't want to let it get me down. I know that it's not really like something about me personally, mostly it's just kind of like part of being in a foreign country where I'm the minority, whereas back home I'm just part of the majority. Foreigners working in Japan long-term get tired of people complimenting them for their Japanese skills. Personally, I'm not tired of it, but I'm very much like, okay, thank you, like I'd like to move on. Like I'll just be like, oh, thank you so much, and I'll just try and shift the conversation, because I've had the conversation so many times, it's like, it doesn't make me feel like, oh yes, my Japanese is so good. Like it's kind of like an empty comment to me, unless people are like, there are times when it will mean something to me, but it's because they're not generically saying it. I think like Japanese people have a lot of set phrases that they'll use when they talk to foreigners, like, and I feel like when it's outside that, I might be a little more happy, or like, I think it's more when they compliment me for using a certain term that's actually difficult, where they're like, oh, they actually understand, like I can speak Japanese to like potentially a higher standard or higher level compared to other people. But yeah, it doesn't bother me. There are people who are like really pissed off about it, but then there's others who are like on the high. They're like, yeah, I'm so good at Japanese, thank you. How to analyze a good job offer in Japan and strike the balance between good work-life balance and good salary. This is going to be case by case. You never really know until you start working there how like extreme the situation is when you work in Japan. I mean, that's the same anywhere. I personally feel like I would search on LinkedIn for like other people working there and see how long they've been there for, and like if you can see what they're talking about, just to kind of dig deep and see how they feel, because if there's a high turnover rate, they're probably not enjoying it. Although Japan does like tend to have the long, like lifelong kind of work contracts, I don't think that applies to younger people anymore. A lot of young people are like jumping between jobs like they do in the West. But yeah, I think it depends where you're at in your life. Like if you want a good salary but you're also committed to like working nonstop, people do that. They do that back home in Australia too. They're like, I just gotta grind for a bit, like grinding culture. If you want both, maybe you just have to negotiate. Maybe you won't be able to work remotely, but you can work in the office. Maybe you can only work twice a week. Like, I don't know. I think it just really depends on the company and the contract and the conditions that you're looking for. The best time to invest in your pension is in your 20s and 30s, and how does being a foreigner in Japan affect that? This is something that I've been worried about a lot lately, in the sense that in Australia, the pension system is really great. So it's called superannuation, and so every month, I believe, or every time you get like income from your employer, they're putting like 10% of your actual salary on top to your pension. They have to pay it. And there's also another initiative by the Australian government where if you put in like $1,000, they will like double it, because you're putting it towards your superannuation. Whereas Japan, I'm just paying like from my salary. Like let's say my salary is like $1,000 a month. They're taking like, I don't know, maybe like $200 and putting it into my pension. I don't have a choice. Like it's not even on top of my salary, it's just deducted from it. So it's different to the Australian one. And then I can't access it until I retire in Japan, which I don't think I'm gonna retire here, like to be completely honest. So for me, I'm just basically donating my pension money to Japan's elderly population that is currently elderly, because it's not my pension, it's actually just like going towards a big sum of money that they're using to like actually provide to the current generation, which is problematic, because once the younger generation, my age, once we get to like 60, 70, there's not going to be apparently enough money for everyone, because there's a aging population, there's not enough birth rate, there's not enough people to support the growing elderly population. So yeah. And then in Japan, if you work as a foreigner, I think if you work here longer than 5 years or 6 years and you leave, you can't take your money out. But if you stay here for like under 5 years, I believe you can take a percentage of it, but not the whole amount. So yeah, I'm kind of screwed, and I'm trying not to think about it, because like I could have like thousands of dollars saved up in Australia, not only from having a higher salary, because Japan doesn't have the best salaries, but because the government also does all these great initiatives. So I'm just like, that's a future me problem. I'm gonna not deal with that. Maybe I won't even need it. Maybe I will pass away before I become old. I don't know. Or maybe I will just win the lottery. Not that I play lottery, so yeah. I'm just not focusing on it. Let me know if I should be doing other things, because I'm not. Help. I just want to say that everything is based off my own experience as well as my friends that I can refer to, but this doesn't apply to everyone working in Japan, so take that with a grain of salt. And if you guys have more questions, let me know. I'd be happy to do another Q&A, and I hope this provided some sort of insight to some of you and this was helpful, because yeah, working in Japan is definitely something you won't know much about until you get here and do it. I'd appreciate so much if you hit the subscribe button, like and comment to support me and continue working in Japan. I'll see you guys in another video. Bye! Oh yeah, one quick tip. When you're done for the workday, you say "お疲れ様でした." お疲れ様 to me